Okay, let's unpack this. For those of you who, regularly track climate shifts and infrastructure planning, you already know how critical long-range weather data is. But what happens when the most advanced tool we have, designed specifically to give us foresight into our rainfall future? I mean, a system crucial for protecting lives and property. What happens when that's suddenly put on ice? Welcome to the Meteorology Matters podcast. Today we're taking a deep dive into something that, well, it really touches every single community across the United States, how we predict extreme rainfall. Especially now, as our climate is, let's face it, rapidly shifting. We're talking about the fundamental science that lets us prepare for dangerous flood events, and importantly, a groundbreaking program that was really poised to revolutionize that preparation. Until it wasn't. We're going to explore what this vital project, known as Atlas 15, was meticulously engineered to achieve, and, maybe more importantly, precisely why its most crucial component, the part that looks squarely into our future rainfall risks, has been, well, inexplicably halted. You're going to hear why leading experts believe this decision could leave entire communities dangerously vulnerable, especially with the escalating number of severe floods we're already seeing. This isn't just about, numbers on a chart. It's about safety, it's about resilience, and frankly, the staggering costs of inaction. So let's set the stage. What exactly is Atlas 15, and why is it considered so incredibly important for the safety and the long-term planning of our communities?
That's really the foundational question, isn't it? What's truly groundbreaking about Atlas 15 is how it's designed. It's meant to be the definitive source, spatially continuous, for understanding precipitation frequency across the entire United States.
Spatially continuous, so like covering everywhere.
Exactly. Think of it as this unparalleled national map. And it doesn't just show you how much rain might fall, but precisely the statistically expected amount for any given storm duration. So that could be anything from a quick 5-minute downpour right up to, say, 2 months of continuous rain.
60 days. Wow.
Yeah, at any specific location you can imagine. And it's not about vague possibilities. It's about the precise probability of an event happening, like, a 20% chance that a certain rainfall amount will be exceeded in any given year.
Okay, so it gives planners actual odds to work with.
Precisely. And this represents a truly monumental upgrade from our current standard, which is called Atlas 14.
Right. Atlas 14, I've had that mentioned a lot in engineering contexts.
Oh, absolutely. For decades, Atlas 14 has been the steadfast bedrock. Civil engineers, regional planners, they've all relied on it. It guides the design of everything from, essential drainage systems to massive city infrastructure projects. Its data really underpins countless critical decisions that affect our daily lives, our safety, the very foundation of our built environment.
So for decades, that's been our guiding star for planning. But now, with our climate changing so fast, it sounds like that star is, well, it's moving, isn't it? And we desperately need a new map.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. The core insight here, the real sort of paradigm shift with Atlas 15, is its move away from what's called a stationary assumption.
Stationary assumption, meaning?
Meaning it assumes the climate is stable, that extreme precipitation events don't significantly change over time. For decades, we designed things as if the climate were static. Imagine building a house for, say, 20th century weather and just assuming it would never fundamentally change.
Which we now know isn't true.
Exactly. But Atlas 15, for the very first time at this national scale, would account for future temporal trends in rainfall, all the way through the year 2100. It embraces a non-stationary assumption.
Non-stationary. Okay, so it builds in the fact that things are changing.
Precisely. Think of it like this. A stationary approach is like predicting future traffic based only on today's patterns.
Okay.
A non-stationary approach, which Atlas 15 embraces, means you're also factoring in that, say, the number of cars on the road is growing every single year. So you predict based on future traffic, not just what's happened before.
That makes sense. You have to account for the trend.
Right. And that foresight is absolutely crucial for planning resilient infrastructure and what we know is a rapidly changing climate. The science has advanced. We unequivocally acknowledge that past patterns are no longer a perfect predictor of future risks, especially with warming global temperatures.
That's a huge leap in thinking, isn't it? It means we're no longer just predicting weather in the short term, but predicting the impact of climate change on weather, specifically rainfall, decades out. And this wasn't just some academic side project, right? This is a federally funded, broadly supported effort.
Exactly right. It's important to note that the United States Congress, specifically through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, actually provided the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration,
NOAA, right.
yes, NOAA, with direct funding to update Atlas 14 and, crucially, develop Atlas 15. NOAA's own Office of Water Prediction is developing it, with contributions from a really vast array of experts across government agencies, private industry, academia. This isn't some small, isolated project. It's a monumental, collaborative scientific endeavor, backed by federal law and broad expertise.
So Atlas 15 sounds like the essential tool we desperately need, especially for a future with more extreme weather and escalating flood risks. But it's not quite that simple, is it? Things got complicated. We understand Atlas 15 was intended to be released in 2 distinct volumes. Can you break those down for us? What do they entail, and where do things stand now?
Absolutely. It was intelligently envisioned in 2 parts, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 provides a comprehensive snapshot of current precipitation estimates. It meticulously accounts for temporal changes and historical observations right up to the present day. When it's published, this will significantly update and supersede the existing Atlas 14 data. So it brings us up to date based on recent history.
Okay, so Volume 1 is like the modern version of Atlas 14, using the latest historical data.
Pretty much. And that part of the project, Volume 1, is still on track. Preliminary estimates for the contiguous U.S. are expected to be available for peer review this year, 2025, and then published estimates by 2026. So that alone is a valuable update for planners and engineers working with, contemporary conditions.
Okay, that's good news at least. But then there's Volume 2.
Right. And here's where the true foresight and, well, the unexpected twist in this story comes in. Volume 2 is where the real forward-looking capability resides. This volume was ingeniously designed to provide model-based precipitation frequency estimates projected directly into the future.
Okay, so that's the non-stationary part in action.
Exactly. It takes the robust current estimates from Volume 1 and then applies these sophisticated adjustment factors based on downscaled climate model data. Essentially, it was built to show us in granular, actionable detail how rainfall risks, the frequency, the intensity of storms, how those will evolve in a warming world, peering decades into the future, to help communities not just react, but proactively prepare.
And this Volume 2, the one that tells us about future risks, that's the part that has been stopped. We've heard conflicting reports about why. What exactly happened to this crucial component?
That's correct. Work on Volume 2, specifically Atlas 15's climate projections, has been put on indefinite hold for months now. According to reports, this decision came after a review of Volume 2 was ordered this spring by Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who is an official appointed by the Donald Trump administration.
Okay, so a review was ordered by the Commerce Secretary. What was the official reason given?
Well, a spokeswoman for the National Weather Service, speaking on behalf of NOAA, confirmed the delay. The statement was that the review is about making sure research dollars and technology investments are being put to the very best use for the American people.
Maximizing resources. But you mentioned conflicting reports.
Yes, because former federal officials who were intimately familiar with the project, they offer a different perspective. Ed Clark, for instance, he was the director of NOAA's National Water Center until recently. He noted that the research for Volume 2 was actually nearly complete before he retired in April.
Nearly complete.
That's what he stated. And he explicitly emphasized that the remaining work wasn't a large price tag, implying that cost wasn't really the primary barrier, or perhaps shouldn't have been.
So we have these 2 narratives. An official statement about maximizing resource use, ensuring taxpayer money is well spent, and on the other hand, experts like Clark saying the work was almost done, wasn't that expensive, and is incredibly vital. From your perspective, what could be the potential arguments for initiating such a review, even if the research was nearing completion? And how do experts weigh those against the warnings we're hearing about losing this critical data?
That's a really crucial point of contention. You could argue from a purely administrative standpoint that any new leadership or even existing leadership under a particular administration might want to review ongoing projects, to ensure alignment with their priorities, perhaps scrutinize the methodology, maybe evaluate the underlying climate models for robustness, even if the scientists involved are confident. Due diligence, they might call it.
Okay, so a standard procedural review, potentially.
Potentially. However, experts like Clark are weighing that against the, frankly, immense public good this data promises. They argue that halting a nearly complete project, one that's described as relatively inexpensive at this stage, and one with such profound implications for public safety and fiscal responsibility, Well, it simply doesn't seem to align with the idea of best use of resources.
Right. The urgency seems to be a major factor for them.
Absolutely. The urgency of climate change impacts, which we're seeing daily, makes any delay in crucial foresight deeply concerning. Regardless of the stated intentions behind the review, the question really becomes whether a review is genuinely about optimizing things, or if it inadvertently, or some might argue, intentionally hampers progress on climate-sensitive projects like this one.
That definitely makes the situation even more perplexing. So, okay, let's get down to brass tacks here. What does this indefinite suspension of Volume 2 mean for us, for the general public? If we lose this crucial future projection, what's the real, tangible impact on our safety, our communities, and ultimately our wallets?
This raises an absolutely vital question, and the answer is quite stark and immediate. We are not talking about hypothetical future problems. Not at all. These are current escalating threats that impact communities right now. The toll of intensifying storms is already painfully apparent across the country. Just look at the first 15 days of July this year. The National Weather Service reported double the usual number of flash floods.
Double. That's significant.
It's huge. And this wasn't just a statistic. It included tragic deluges, like in central Texas, that claimed over 130 lives. Heavy rains in the Northeast drowned 2 people in New Jersey, severely submerged New York's subway stations, paralyzing parts of the city. These aren't isolated incidents anymore. They're becoming horrifyingly more frequent, more intense. And without the forward-looking data that Atlas 15 Volume 2 promised, communities are, frankly, tragically struggling to keep up.
Feels like we're constantly reacting, not preparing.
Exactly. And consider this alarming reality. Communities across the country are still relying on rainfall data that is decades old to determine their flood risks and design their infrastructure. Decades.
Decades old. In this rapidly changing climate.
Yes. Imagine trying to navigate a rapidly changing, unpredictable road ahead by looking only in your rearview mirror. That's essentially what we're doing without these future projections. Without Atlas 15 Volume 2, there will be no single authoritative national data set to show how rainfall and flood threats will undeniably increase as the world warms. This creates a dangerous and, frankly, expanding knowledge gap for absolutely crucial long-term planning. It leaves us blindsided by events that we could and really should anticipate.
And even Volume 1, the updated historical data, might not be enough.
Well, Jeremy Porter, who leads climate implications research at the First Street Foundation, he highlights that critical point. Even Volume 1, which uses historical data, he says, will be out of date very quickly because rising global temperatures are just so profoundly and rapidly altering precipitation patterns.
Right. The underlying system's changing too fast.
Exactly. The physics are clear, they're undeniable. A warmer atmosphere simply holds more moisture. That provides significantly more fuel for extreme storms. His team's analysis found that a staggering 20% of the U.S. has already seen a 4-fold increase in the likelihood of what used to be considered a 1-in-100-year rainfall event.
A 4-fold increase for 1/5 of the country already.
And these once-rare events are now expected to become even more common, turning what we thought of as once-in-a-lifetime floods into much more frequent, devastating occurrences.
So it's not just about bigger storms. It's like our whole definition of extreme is being rapidly rewritten, and our current plans just aren't accounting for it.
What's the practical implication of that for, say, a city engineer trying to design a bridge or a culvert? Precisely. It's a moving target, and they're aiming based on old information. Ed Clark, the former NOAA official we mentioned, he explicitly stated that delaying or canceling Atlas 15's climate projections could leave communities dangerously unprepared for these shifting flood risks. He stressed that it makes it significantly harder, maybe even impossible sometimes, for engineers to properly design buildings, bridges, road culverts, all sorts of vital projects, to design them to cope with future rainfall extremes that are no longer theoretical, but, imminent.
And he linked it to cost savings, didn't he?
He did. His summation was powerful, I thought. He said, designing our infrastructure for resilience is fundamentally a cost-saving measure. When we don't design for these future conditions, we are essentially guaranteeing that we'll have to pay far more later, often repeatedly. To repair or replace severely damaged infrastructure, it drains taxpayer dollars and massively disrupts lives.
That really puts it in perspective. It's not just about the initial cost, but the long-term cost of not preparing.
Exactly. And Chad Briginis, he's the executive director of the Association of State Floodplain Managers, he emphasizes this point, especially for you, the taxpayer. He points out that city and state regulations and the civil engineers designing critical infrastructure, they aren't just encouraged, they're often required to consult NOAA's data. And these projects, bridges, dams, drainage systems, they're meant to last 50 years, maybe even more.
50 years or more, built on potentially outdated data.
That's the risk. So without these future projections, Berginnis asks us to think about building infrastructure that simply wasn't designed for the weather conditions climate change is bringing.
The cycle of damage and repair.
Precisely. His conclusion is crystal clear. If we have this future information, we won't have to continue to be in the cycle of damage, repair, replace, damage again. This isn't just about scientific accuracy. It's about fundamental fiscal responsibility and the basic well-being of every American community.
That's a very stark reminder of the financial and human cost. And wasn't there even concrete evidence of this impact from areas that did get a glimpse of this forward-looking data?
Right.
A pilot program.
There was, yes. Which makes the suspension even more frustrating for many observers. A pilot version of Atlas 15 was done for Montana, and it did include future projections. It showed that rainfall rates for what were once considered 1 in 100-year events could increase significantly on the current warming path. This isn't abstract theory, it's tangible data for a specific region.
And what about other vulnerable areas?
Well, flood-prone regions like the Northeast and Appalachia, they are expected to experience even greater increases in extreme rainfall. But without Volume 2 being completed and released, those states won't know the exact extent of these critical changes. They're left planning, essentially flying blind, planning for a past climate that, quite simply, no longer exists. It's like knowing there's a storm coming, but having no idea if it's just a drizzle or a Category 5 hurricane.
This is a truly sobering picture. Okay, let's shift gears slightly for a moment, though it's all connected. Let's zoom in on the cutting-edge science that was being developed for Volume 2. What exactly are we talking about when we discuss tools like iMERG and these hybrid models? And what capability are we actually missing out on by not having Volume 2 move forward?
Absolutely. It's important to understand the sophistication here. The research we're discussing, leveraging something called integrated multi-satellite retrievals for global precipitation measurement.
iMERG.
iMERG, exactly. It's precisely the kind of advanced science that would have fed directly into Atlas 15 Volume 2. iMERG is really a next-generation satellite-based precipitation product. It's incredibly sophisticated. It doesn't just collect data from one satellite, but combines data from various satellite sources. And then, crucially, it rigorously calibrates that data with extensive global ground observations rain gauges on the ground. This multi-source, validated approach gives it an incredibly high degree of accuracy and reliability for precipitation estimates, especially across vast regions where ground data might be sparse.
Okay, so it's pulling together the best of space-based and ground-based data.
In essence, yes. And the study we're looking at introduces a novel hybrid PDF model for estimating what are called depth duration frequency curves, DDF curves, using this iMERG data.
DDF curves. Remind us what those are again.
Right. DDF curves are basically the precision blueprints for engineers and hydrologists. They tell you exactly how much rain depth is expected over a given time duration, say 1 hour or 24 hours. And critically, how often frequency that kind of event is likely to occur, maybe once every 10 years or once every 100 years, or even more rarely. This data is the absolute bedrock for designing everything from storm drains and culverts to bridges and skyscrapers, ensuring they can handle the expected rainfall without failing.
Got it. So these DDF curves are the vital numbers engineers need. How does this new hybrid model improve on how we get those numbers?
Well, the true brilliance of this hybrid model isn't just about using more data, like from iMERG, but its inherent intelligence, if you will. This model integrates no less than 4 different probability distribution functions.
Okay, probability distribution functions.
Yeah.
Those are the math formulas.
Exactly. They're just the mathematical formulas or models that help us predict the likelihood of different rainfall amounts happening. The probability of getting 2 inches in an hour versus 5 inches, for example. Now, why is using 4 of them so important? Because no single mathematical model works perfectly across all climate zones. A formula that's great for, say, the rainy Pacific Northwest might not be the best for the arid Southwest.
So different climates need different math.
Essentially, yes. What this hybrid approach does is it dynamically adjusts its weights, how much importance it gives to each of those 4 individual mathematical models based on the specific local climate conditions. This optimizes the rainfall estimates for both wet regions and dry regions, making the predictions much more accurate and precisely tailored to specific geographies. That's crucial for real-world application.
So it adapts itself depending on where you're looking.
Precisely. And the study rigorously showed that the DDF estimates derived from IMERG using this hybrid model align very strongly with the existing Atlas 14 data, where we have good ground truth from over 2,300 stations across the contiguous U.S. This validation isn't just a detail. It powerfully demonstrates its robust capability for continental-scale extreme precipitation analysis. It's not just a theoretical concept, it's a proven, high-performing tool ready for prime time.
That sounds like a significant step forward in accuracy.
It is. A key innovation here is that this hybrid model gives us a much better way to understand how precipitation extremes actually vary with climate zone and wetness conditions. That's a major improvement over relying on just one single model approach for everywhere. And its adaptability to climate change projections is absolutely key. Remember, those projections predict not only increases in extreme precipitation, but also significant shifts in patterns.
Right. Things might get wetter overall in some places, but maybe the rain falls in shorter, more intense bursts, for example.
Exactly. So, for instance, in high precipitation areas like the eastern U.S., where heavy, prolonged rains are common, the model might determine an optimal equal weighting for its components to capture those events accurately. But then, in drier western areas where maybe flashier, shorter duration intense events are more critical, it intelligently adapts. It might give more weight to the mathematical models better suited for those specific conditions. This capability means significantly more accurate, extreme precipitation forecasting, tailored for very different regional needs across the country.
That kind of regional precision sounds incredibly valuable. It moves away from a one-size-fits-all approach to something that genuinely understands the nuances of different climates. Were there any limitations or biases identified? I mean, that's pretty common in complex modeling like this, right?
Absolutely, and it's important to acknowledge them. Understanding limitations is just part of robust science. The research did identify some biases, which is normal and expected. For example, IMERG tends to slightly underestimate rainfall in some of the drier western regions, particularly for shorter duration events, and it might slightly overestimate in some wetter eastern areas, especially for longer durations.
Okay, so there are known tendencies.
Yes, but these are well understood biases. The crucial point is that because they are understood, they can be accounted for. They can be further refined through ongoing research and calibration. These aren't fundamental flaws that undermine the model's overall utility. They're known quantities that engineers and planners are actually trained to work with. Knowing these biases allows them to apply precise adjustment factors in their designs, ensuring real-world accuracy.
So the biases are known and manageable.
Correct. And this kind of precise, regionally adapted predictive analytics is truly essential for developing effective climate adaptation strategies. It directly supports better flood risk management. It leads to improved and more resilient infrastructure planning. It even enables more effective ecosystem conservation in areas most vulnerable to climate-induced extreme weather events. Plus, the ability to seamlessly integrate this kind of model with machine learning techniques further amplifies its potential. It allows for continuous learning and improvement in forecasting accuracy over time. It's like a living tool that learns and gets better.
It certainly sounds like the science is not only ready, but really capable of providing the nuanced, forward-looking information our communities desperately need to face a changing climate. It seems then that the suspension of Volume 2 could really lead us to inadvertently or perhaps deliberately ignore these critical insights into our changing climate, potentially leaving communities much more vulnerable. That's a profound implication, isn't it?
It is. It essentially means we might be consciously choosing to operate with an incomplete picture of our future risks, despite having the scientific capability right here, right now, to paint a much clearer one.
So to try and tie all this together, we've explored Atlas 15, its immense promise to help us foresee future rainfall extremes, and the really groundbreaking science like IMERG and the hybrid models that was driving it forward. Yet the critical Volume 2, the part designed specifically to give us those absolutely vital future projections, that's been indefinitely suspended following a review ordered by officials in the Donald Trump administration. And as we've heard, this isn't just about scientific data, as important as that is. It seems deeply connected to the safety of our homes, the long-term resilience of our roads, bridges, cities, our infrastructure, and of course the massive escalating costs we continue to face from ever-increasing flood events across the country.
That's right. Without these authoritative future projections, communities are really left trying to build and plan with an incomplete picture. They're relying on outdated assumptions in a world that is fundamentally and rapidly changing around them. The consequences are tangible. We see them in the news. More frequent and devastating floods, higher repair costs for taxpayers, and most tragically, more lives put needlessly at risk.
The ability to predict these future conditions using advanced tools like the IMERG hybrid model.
Hmm.
It sounds less like an academic exercise and more like, as you said, a taxpayer-saving, even life-saving imperative.
Many experts would certainly argue that.
So the decision to halt this work, to pause this progress, it means that we as a nation are potentially less informed and consequently far more vulnerable to the accelerating impacts of climate change that we know are happening. As you, our listeners, go about your day, maybe consider the floods we've already seen just this July alone. Think about the mounting costs of rebuilding, both financially and, emotionally for the communities affected. Now, just imagine for a moment if our communities actually had that authoritative, forward-looking data that Atlas 15 Volume 2 promised. What fundamental changes would we make in our infrastructure, our zoning laws, our emergency preparedness plans? What devastating disasters could we potentially avert or at least mitigate significantly? That's something truly worth mulling over. Thank you for joining us on this critical discussion for the Meteorology Matters podcast. It's certainly given us a lot to think about. For more insights into the world of meteorology and how it impacts all our lives, make sure you follow meteorologist Rob Jones on Instagram. His handle there is simply meteorologist. On TikTok, you can find him at TV Meteorologist. And for all things weather, including our full podcast playlist, you can subscribe to Rob Jones Hurricane over on YouTube. You'll find the Meteorology Matters podcast playlist right there, too. Stay informed and stay curious.